U.S. has been at war for 2 years. Among the 16 million Americans who serve in active duty are 8 future American presidents.
War is the greatest test of character. The question is, do you pass that test?
Naval Reserve Officer Lyndon Johnson has already confronted devastating live fire. As has the man he will one day serve as vice president, John F. Kennedy.
John Kennedy and his men have been abandoned for dead.
3 future presidents are in the Pacific: Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, and Richard Nixon.
Nixon experiences relentless, unending bombing.
On Dwight D. Eisenhower rests perhaps the heaviest burden: a coming battle that must not fail.
D-Day is the largest military operation in global history.
1944 is the year that it all comes down to. Who has the will, the resources, the courage to win the war?
This is the story of how war transforms 8 men into leaders, and how their leadership changes the world.
When you shed blood for your country, you're never the same afterwards. You are part of something much larger than yourself.
As the U.S. faces another year of war, Americans prepare for the biggest push yet.
Each and every one of us has a solemn obligation to serve this nation in its most critical hour.
1944 will be the critical year. Thousands will die, tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands. And we don't actually know in the end that everything will go right.
In London, General Dwight Eisenhower plans Operation Overlord, the coming top-secret invasion of France that could free Europe from Nazi dominance.
There was simply no precedent for the size of the operations that were being considered, for the scope and scale of the logistics involved. Eisenhower was collecting millions of troops for an effort that would happen someday. Nobody knows when, but it's going to begin soon.
In the Pacific, the Allied strategy of island hopping, codenamed Operation Cartwheel, continues. After hard-won victories at Guadalcanal and the Gilbert Islands, they are still a long way from Tokyo.
It would take American forces weeks to move 3 or 4 miles. It was almost like trench warfare from World War I transplanted to the Pacific.
On Bougainville Island, Allies have built an airstrip as an attack and resupply base.
The machine can't function without fuel, and it can't function without food, and it can't function without water or clothing or equipment. So these are jobs that have to be done.
The officer in charge of unloading some of the 60-plus tons of supplies is Richard Nixon.
When he's in the service in the Pacific, he is a good leader. He leads his men well. Also, he's a patriot. He loves the United States. He is helping win the war.
Desperate to halt Allied advances, the Japanese are targeting Allied supply lines.
The Japanese are bombing these back areas, and in 1 month they're bombed almost every night.
Nixon's unit, the South Pacific Combat Air Transport Command, loses so many men, It's known as Murder Incorporated.
Nixon is bearing the brunt of this advance.
You hear a whistle, and you just hope it's not the last thing you hear.
Take cover!
The Solomon Island bombing is traumatizing for Richard Nixon. He feels vulnerable. He's an open target. Everybody there is. They're sitting ducks.
It's hard to comprehend feeling like at any moment, you know, the end of your life might come out of the sky. It's something that I can relate to, but for almost a whole month of it is, I mean, that's really something. I can imagine it'd be hard to keep it together.
Richard Nixon didn't need to be here. Born in 1913 into a Quaker family, he could request not to fight.
Richard Nixon is raised in Whittier, California. His parents run a grocery store. It's a very humble background.
Nixon was an A student, but growing up poor was challenging.
He was poor, he was awkward, he was socially inept. All of that drove him to seek great heights. He makes his move to Washington to work in the Office of Price Administration at the very beginning of World War II.
He finds this work very boring, and he's chafing at the bit to be in the thick of the action and to do something more patriotic.
He, like other aspiring politicians, understood that it would be very important to somehow put themselves in harm's way.
Nixon was an extremely ambitious man, and if you were a young man in the Navy, you wanted to fight. You wanted to go to the fight. You wanted to be in combat.
Back in London, more bombs rained down. In the last month, nearly 400 people have been killed.
It's the first large-scale bombing attack that Hitler launches since the London Blitz.
These raids are a warning that we should all be on the alert and absolutely ready. The enemy means to hit back as hard as he can, whenever he can.
For Eisenhower, the raids only intensify the pressure.
Eisenhower is the man who has more pressure on his shoulders, I think, perhaps than any other human being, perhaps in history at this point. He is in charge of the largest military operation in global history. American planners, British planners, everyone knows you need to get to Germany, get to Berlin, and the road there is through France.
Eisenhower has set a secret timetable for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Europe.
The real game changer is going to be the landings in Normandy that are going to happen in a few months' time.
We can and we will win this war. But it means that every one of us, no matter where he is or what he's doing, must do his full duty.
He, just 2 years ago, had no combat experience. And now he has been given control over this significant operation. Over 3 million men will be at his employ.
The question is whether Eisenhower has learned everything that he needs to learn to make this a success. And he'll know that others are asking the very same questions about his leadership.
It's going to be an enormous operation, and so all energies are geared towards pulling this off.
Operation Overlord is bold, daring, and risky. Instead of circumventing France to reach Germany, it will get to Germany as Eisenhower has always wanted, straight across the English Channel.
Eisenhower's putting everything on the line for a direct attack into Nazi Europe. His plan is to start in Britain, go directly through the Channel, which is a significant risk because the entire operation can get mowed down on the beaches of Normandy.
Operation Overlord's importance is so high, that multiple decoy operations are prepared to fool Nazi spies.
If you can deceive the enemy, pull the wool over their eyes, then you're going to be much more likely to successfully complete your operation with minimum casualties. Now, Eisenhower knows that anything he can do to mislead the enemy will save American and Allied lives.
They create a phony army in East Anglia. They've even created these phony tanks, hundreds of them, that they know the Germans will catch sight of, and it's commanded by Patton, who the Germans have a lot of respect for. They've got double agents sending the wrong signals to Germany. They've got all kinds of means of convincing the enemy. But this could all go wrong, and if it does go wrong, there's a chance there's going to be an absolute bloodbath.
Incoming! Incoming! Incoming!
As Eisenhower prepares to invade France, in the South Pacific, Lieutenant Richard Nixon's airbase has been bombed for a solid month. After one raid, Nixon counts 35 bomb craters within 100 feet of his air raid bunker.
Must have had a tremendous transformative effect on Richard Nixon, realizing what it truly means to be out in the open. To have nowhere to hide. Have no defenses. And that's part of the World War II experience for Richard Nixon. He knows what combat is, and later as Commander-in-Chief, he's going to relive those moments.
In February, Nixon's unit is moved 60 miles north to Green Islands. They are finally out of the firing line.
You're tired, you're exhausted, and so to get back to a place where you can just relax and have something as simple as a hot meal makes all the difference in the world.
Nixon becomes a very popular guy in World War II for the first time in his life.
Nixon was not a naturally happy person, but he seems to have been about as happy as he could get in wartime.
He opens Nick's Snack Shack, and he's able to give guys coming back from the front a little taste of home. Hamburgers and beer.
I was about the most popular officer in the South Pacific because of that hamburger stand. They were pretty good.
You could draw a parallel between Richard Nixon's Snack Shack and his later politics. His going for things that he knows are popular and that will win him political points, get him into office, and keep him in office.
He's wheeling and dealing a little bit. He's able to horse trade, to swap Japanese rifles for a bottle of whiskey.
He bends the rules in order to get this stuff, and bending the rules seems to work.
He was now one of the guys. He would play cards, and in particular poker.
My technique was to play it very close to the vest. I knew when to get out of a pot. I didn't stick around when I didn't have the cards. I didn't bluff very often.
He's shrewd. He makes about $10,000, which in modern dollars is more like $100,000. It's a lot of poker money.
Nixon is able to use it later on to fund his political campaign.
25 years later, as president,
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear that I will...
Nixon will also use his wartime experience to try to end the conflict in Vietnam.
The biggest poker game at the time, of course, was the Vietnam War, and in particular, how to get the North Vietnamese to the negotiating table.
To help force North Vietnam's hand, he orders a major bombing campaign in December 1972.
In what the North Vietnamese have called 12 Days of Darkness, Over 740 sorties took place and dropped over 17,000 tons of bombs over North Vietnam. Nothing was off limits.
There's a calculating aspect to this bombing. It runs for day after day after day, round-the-clock, intensive bombing.
Because Nixon had been bombed himself in World War II, he knew the percussive effect. He knew that it was terrifying.
And I can't help but to believe that that informs Nixon's strategy in Vietnam.
The Christmas bombings actually succeeds. The North Vietnamese do return to the negotiating table.
He did argue that the bombing worked, that it got a deal.
2 years later, the Vietnam War comes to an end.
During World War II, we see Richard Nixon at his best. He forged relationships and showed courage. When he remembered those lessons in the White House, he did well. And when he forgot them, he suffered, and so did the nation.
While Nixon is stationed in the Solomon Islands,
Movie stars arriving in Washington to help sell war bonds.
another future president helps raise more money for the nation's hugely expensive war effort.
Captain, these orders came to you from headquarters. Oh boy, my leave orders.
Captain Ronald Reagan, an actor from the 1st Motion Picture Unit, is taking part in the U.S. government's 4th war loan drive.
What do they want with me in Washington?
The Army asks Reagan to partake in Liberty Bond rallies. This represented a real change in what Reagan was used to.
Thousands of people attend the war bond rallies.
And how that crowd lines up to buy bonds. They buy knowing that every dollar invested helps send more planes, tanks, and ships to the United Nations.
And there Reagan is before a live audience, trying to do something different. Not act, not play a fictional role, but persuade an audience to do something.
Put your hands together for Ronald Reagan!
He reminds Americans, buying a war bond, you too can participate in the war. You may not carry a rifle, you may not work in a factory, but you can give something for the war. You can own a piece of victory.
Reagan had this great capacity to take a concept or an event and make people feel like they were a part of it.
The war bond rallies are a huge success.
Over 370 stars sell almost $850 million in war bonds in 1 month. That's a significant amount of money.
They are also a turning point for Reagan, who will one day be known as the great communicator.
Reagan doesn't learn to convince people through logic. He doesn't learn to convince people through arguments. He touches their heart.
Meanwhile, in Europe, General Eisenhower has 150,000 troops on standby in England, waiting for D-Day. The time and location of the invasion is still top secret.
It's an incredibly exciting time. Men are training all over the countryside. There wouldn't have been a single village in the country which wouldn't have had a military unit attached to it.
Off the southern coast of England, thousands of ships from all allied nations are preparing for the invasion signal.
But as the troops prepare, their leaders are at breaking point. At issue, control of the Allied bomber planes. Eisenhower wants them to soften up French targets to support Operation Overlord.
Eisenhower is determined that he needs the Bomber Command Force. The success of D-Day is paramount, and nothing will stand in his way. And Churchill says, absolutely not. You're not going to get those bombers. They're going to continue to bomb Germany.
A frustrated Eisenhower finally threatens to resign.
Eisenhower says, I've had enough of this bunch of prima donnas. Churchill can run his own damn war.
I mean, imagine what would have happened if Eisenhower resigned at that point. How would the war be executed? How would D-Day happen?
March 1944. General Dwight D. Eisenhower is in a standoff with Winston Churchill over control of Allied bombers in Europe. Eisenhower wants them to bomb France in preparation for D-Day, but Churchill won't allow it.
Churchill's concern is they're going to cause immense casualties among French civilians. He's worried about the consequences this will have with the relations with France after the war.
But Eisenhower believes he has no choice. He has to do whatever he can to see his plan through to the end.
So Eisenhower decided to take matters into his own hand, and he went straight to Charles de Gaulle, the French leader, going over the head of Churchill. And he went to de Gaulle and asked de Gaulle about bombing French targets and possibly French civilians.
And Eisenhower says, well, what do the French think? And de Gaulle says, the French people will suffer whatever the sacrifice is they have to suffer. So yes, bomb the bridges, bomb the railway centers, and invade and help liberate our country.
With that answer, Churchill finally backs down. It's a significant victory for the American general.
This is an acknowledgement that Eisenhower is in total control of the course of the campaign.
This was a huge power shift in the relationship between the US and the UK. You can't underestimate this moment. At this point now, the US is in control of the Allied coalition. What Eisenhower says goes.
Eisenhower immediately orders Bomber Command to take to the air. His plan for D-Day requires 150,000 men to land in Normandy. To succeed, the details must remain secret.
If you think about it, if the Germans know when and where, they're well on the way to winning because they control the whole continent in this sense, and you would be at a little beach and they can just throw everybody in there and nail you.
So Eisenhower orders the bombers to strike the port of Calais as a decoy.
So once the Allies decide on Normandy, they want the Germans to think the invasion's coming at Calais.
Calais has been described as a mystery target. The Allied air onslaught is being sustained with ever-increasing violence.
So for every one bombing mission against Normandy targets, there are 2 against Calais.
It's a huge risk.
If the deception fails, then Eisenhower is facing greater casualties, greater losses. And he might lose his command.
As D-Day preparations continue in Europe, 10,000 new recruits are arriving in the Pacific every week. One of them is a 19-year-old airman.
Hurry up, guys!
George Bush is a newly qualified naval pilot on board the USS San Jacinto, an aircraft carrier in the West Pacific. After 2 years of training, he's going into combat for the first time.
It is said that George Bush was probably the youngest naval aviator at that time in World War II.
Pilot, man your plane. Pilot, man your plane.
George Bush is part of an elite squadron. He is a Grumman Avenger pilot, the war's heaviest, deadliest single-engine aircraft.
The Grumman Avenger is a remarkable plane. There's almost 10,000 of them produced over the course of the war. It is a bomber which can drop torpedoes, which can also be used as a dive bomber. so that you're not just simply flying at the enemy, you are the missile yourself.
Those who were aviators were considered to be the cream of the crop. We have to remember that any kind of aviation back in the 1940s was still very new. It was still very new to the military. It was certainly new in the civilian world. It was just a glamorous kind of job.
You're excited. You're getting to put in place what you've spent over 2 years training to do. I think your biggest emotion is, don't let me screw up.
We all set, boys? Ready, Bob.
First time that you are going into a combat zone, you've got a flood of, I wouldn't say emotions, but feelings. Everything is so focused, hyper-focused on your mission.
His very first combat mission is to go bomb targets on a Japanese-held island. Imagine taking off of an aircraft carrier, flying an hour or so to a predetermined target, knowing you're going over a Japanese-held island, and knowing that the anti-aircraft batteries are aimed at you.
I see it.
Everything about being a pilot in World War II was a dangerous activity. And it was always amazing for those planes to come back from their bombing missions and be able to land on those aircraft carriers safely.
But landing on a carrier in the Pacific Ocean can be deadly. And George Bush is next in line.
All right, boys. Coming in for landing.
Naval aviator George Bush just completed his first combat run in the Pacific. But he's not safe yet.
All right, boys. Coming in for landing.
Even landing his plane is perilous.
Comes back unscathed and is happy to have that first mission out of the way.
Oh, man.
The intensity of each mission forges deep bonds.
He was not an aloof Navy officer. He was a tremendous friend and tremendous colleague to men from all walks of life.
One of the friends George Bush makes is a man called Jim Wicks.
They joined the squadron together, which means they've been roommates for many, many months. And despite their very different backgrounds, there was probably a lifelong friendship there.
On May 23, 1944, as the squadron returns, all aircraft are accounted for, except one.
Sunday, June 4th, 1944. Dear Mrs. Wicks, for the past year, your son Jim and I have been very close friends.
I know your son well and have long considered myself fortunate to be one of his intimate friends.
I realize the news of his being missing has brought into your home a good deal of grief and sorrow. But however difficult it may be, you must never give up hope.
So let us be brave. Let us keep faith and hope in our hearts, and may our prayers be answered.
God bless you and your family, George Bush.
George Bush's friend is never seen again.
I'm sure President Bush thinks of him every day. Jim Wicks did not survive, as we now know.
He has shed tears over the death of his friend. And this is a genuine first trauma that George Bush experiences in the war, when someone so desperately close to him from a year's worth of friendship is taken from him so suddenly.
Bush realizes he's defying the odds.
We know that the average number of combat missions before being shot down at this point is 12.
George Bush knows now that every time he takes off from the USS San Jacinto, it could be his last. June 5th, 1944. After months of top-secret planning, D-Day is finally here. Tomorrow, General Eisenhower will send 150,000 men into the jaws of the enemy. And the enemy is waiting.
Hitler knew that the Allies were going to invade in France. He just didn't know where or when. And so he had to set up defenses across 500 miles of French coastline in order to protect against that.
Hitler has bunkers all along the French coast, along with 6 million mines and over 3,000 artillery waiting on the French beaches.
The formidable defense in depth of the Atlantic Wall, bristling with gun emplacements and fortifications.
But Hitler has no idea what's about to hit him. The Allies have 7,000 ships, more than 10,000 planes, and over 7,000 tons of bombs, all ready to go.
There's definitely a feeling that Eisenhower has that if you bring as many troops and firepower to bear on the enemy as possible at any one point, you're going to lose the fewest number of soldiers yourself.
There's only one element Eisenhower can't control.
The Allied powers have been gearing up for this operation for over a year. And then what stops them? Of all things, the weather.
You have heavy rains and winds and, choppy and heavy seas.
The Allies have been waiting for the right tides to proceed. If they don't launch within 24 hours, they'll miss their chance. And Hitler will get more time to beef up his defenses.
Does he go or does he stay? If he stays, it's going to be another 2 or 3 weeks before they can launch the operation.
This is agonizing. He's got thousands of men on ships ready to go, paratroopers ready to land, bombers ready to fly.
The last time Eisenhower delayed for weather, he cost 10,000 American casualties in Tunisia's Kasserine Pass. This time would be different.
Eisenhower makes the decision with everyone, not only in the room, but in the world, in effect, looking to him.
The 150,000 men are ready to go.
You have the entire history and future of the free world resting on your shoulders. It's one of the most remarkable moments in modern history.
The higher you get, the greater the stress level. When it was really, really bad, you could see the red in the blood of your eyelids.
Everyone is waiting for the answer. Eisenhower has made his decision. Operation Overlord is a go.
Eisenhower orders the elite 101st Airborne to drop behind Nazi lines in advance.
They're going to capture key towns, key crossroads, key choke points, look for fights, mess with German reinforcements, cut their communication lines, and do what young paratroopers do best, which is cause trouble. Now that's a dangerous mission.
Before they take off, the 101st Airborne receives a surprise visitor.
You see him leaning into these men, and he's talking with them animatedly, and I'm thinking, those are Ike's sons. All of those are his sons. He feels this in a way that's almost personal.
It was Eisenhower's great touch that he could inspire and motivate troops the way he did. And it was also part of his preparation for becoming a political leader.
Perhaps 70% of the men he looks at that evening are expected not to be alive within 24 hours.
Eisenhower prepares for two outcomes. He writes two letters. One will not be made public until years later.
Those letters are quite extraordinary. One of them is a letter that he plans to release if the invasion doesn't go to plan. And that letter, if it was ever released to the public, not only would have been the end of his career, but could have been the end of the war.
Our landings have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone.
He was prepared to announce to the world that the operation had failed and that it was his responsibility.
That's unique in military history. You won't find many instances when a general will so overtly take command saying, I know this was terrible, I know it failed, I know it screwed up. It's my fault. Blame me.
The other letter that Eisenhower writes that night is to the soldiers. Knowing that he's sending them possibly to their deaths, it's emotional, and it tells about how these men are going to be heroes for generations to come.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Setting 1012.
Dawn, June 6th, 1944.
Audio 10, crossover engine.
D-Day.
This is it. This is the moment that Eisenhower has been waiting for years. It's almost impossible to imagine what he must have been feeling at that very moment.
D-Day is more than just the largest operation in global history from a military perspective. D-Day is about ending the war.
From the early hours, wave after wave of troops are parachuted behind enemy lines. Including the 101st Airborne. They must secure the exits from 5 different beaches where the Allied invasion force will come ashore. If they don't, the landing troops will be pinned down on the sands. And D-Day will fail.
If those exits aren't secured, there's a chance there's going to be an absolute bloodbath. So it's a crucial element of the plan.
Assault troops begin boarding landing crafts.
He could get them ashore, he could put them in harm's way. But what they did when they got there, when they came face to face with the enemy, that was something else again.
At 5:30 a.m., nearly 7,000 Allied ships pound the beaches of Normandy. "30 minutes later, an urgent message from Eisenhower is broadcast to the people of Normandy.
This is a special bulletin. Leave the town at once. Keep as far as possible away from roads and railroad lines. Leave on foot, only carrying essentials.
Having lives on the line that he's responsible for, he does not take that lightly. Human lives matter to him.
Eisenhower is under terrible pressure. He is sending men out to die. Not dozens of men or scores of men, but thousands of men. That's on him.
At 6:30 a.m., the landings begin. Tens of thousands of troops surge onto the beaches into Nazi fire.
Everything that Eisenhower has, personally, politically, strategically, is wrapped up in a successful operation.
If he doesn't succeed, the whole operation itself is in jeopardy. You then have a very long, nervy wait for Eisenhower as information is coming back.
There's a mounting anxiety to find out what's actually going on.
About 7 o'clock, the first indications have come in that the airborne operation has been successful. They did the job. They sealed off those causeways. And not all of the news is positive.
On Omaha Beach, where 40,000 Allied troops and over 3,000 vehicles are attempting to land, there's chaos. Landing craft struggle to reach their targets. 27 of the first 29 tanks sink in the rough seas.
There's a lot of opposition from the Germans. And a lot of American soldiers are being killed there.
Americans wake up to the news that the Normandy landings are underway. The stock exchange holds 2 minutes of prayer at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And services are held throughout the country. 5 hours after the landings at Omaha, Eisenhower gets news that around 2,000 American soldiers are dead. But the Germans are not sending reinforcements to Normandy. They're still waiting in Calais.
The Germans are convinced, because of the success of the deception plans, that the actual attack is going to take place on Pas-de-Calais.
We need to try to get more material, more men, more armor, more firepower into France. It's a race against time.
1 p.m. Eisenhower's troops are beginning to make progress against Nazi defenses at all 5 beaches. More than 1,000 aircraft dropped 6,000 tons of bombs to disrupt German communication and supply lines between French towns. 3 hours later, the Allies begin advancing inland from the beaches. Reinforcements keep coming from Britain.
Eisenhower learned that if you're going to go in, you have to go in hard. He took that lesson all the way from D-Day to the White House.
At 6:20 p.m., Churchill announces in London that Eisenhower's plan is going well. By nightfall on D-Day, more than 150,000 troops are ashore. There are 10,000 Allied casualties.
By the end of the day, there's very much a feeling that the worst is over, in the sense that at least we're ashore and we haven't been driven off. So I think it's at that point, probably by the end of the 6th of June, that Eisenhower can breathe a huge sigh of relief. Churchill and the rest of the British are now in no doubt, not least because of some of the difficult decisions he's taken, that he was the right man for the job.
Over the next 3 weeks, Operation Overlord continues at a staggering pace. Over 500,000 men cross the Channel and push into France. Even so, the mighty German army still lies ahead.
He's more than well aware that things could still turn south very quickly. He still is outgunned, outnumbered, outmanned, outsupplied in every single facet of the war, except for in the air.
Eisenhower has proven himself up to this point, but now he's on Hitler's turf. And it's not going to get any easier. They have a long way to go.
As Eisenhower pushes forward in Europe, in Massachusetts is Lieutenant John F. Kennedy. It's 10 months since his PT boat was sunk by a Japanese destroyer in the Solomon Islands.
The courage and the confidence that he has in saving his crew. It is a true story of bravery and brilliance.
Kennedy later said that this event was his single greatest moment of his life. Think about that. It's the moment that made him. It made him a man, it made him a leader, and it made him a hero.
On June 12th, 6 days after D-Day, he receives a Purple Heart and the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for gallantry in action. He is the only president to receive them. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, 19-year-old Jimmy Carter is on board the USS New York.
In 1944, Carter is still training. There's still a threat of German submarines, and he still mans anti-aircraft guns. He's just not firing them. And it's really not until after the war that Carter gets to test his mettle as a military leader. And that's when he works on nuclear submarines during the Korean War.
In the Pacific, George Bush continues to defy the odds of survival as he prepares for his 50th mission. Bush and his crew know they're on borrowed time. They've now flown 4 times the average most airmen survive.
Torpedo bombing is among the most reckless and dangerous things a pilot could be asked to do. Every day George Bush flew in the air, he did not know if he was coming back. He did not know if he would be lost at sea. He did not know if he would die in a fiery explosion. Every day he would come home and find more of his friends not there.
At dawn on September 2nd, George Bush sets out to destroy a key enemy communications tower on the island of Chichijima. Bush's assault on Chichijima is part of the forward attack on Japan itself.
It's essentially a volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean. It's well emplaced, it's a difficult position, and they've already tried to hit it once before and not been successful.
On board is John Delaney, George Bush's long-term radio man, and gunner Ted White, a friend of the Bush family.
He was one of his brother's friends from Yale, and he was visiting the carrier, doing his own duties in the Pacific, and realized he had never actually experienced what it was like to be on a bombing run in a combat mission. Bush agreed for him to come along.
Approaching enemy coast. We've got flak on the port. I see it. There she is. Chichijima. I see the radio towers. I'm taking it down. Be a good run, boss. We're taking a hit on the port wing. Fire on the wing.
He still carries on, drops his bombs. He then banks away from the island to try to get as far away from it as possible because he knows he's going down. And he says to his two crew members, hit the silk.
Hit the silk!
Hit the silks, meaning use your parachutes.
He hits the tail of the plane. It gashes his forehead, and it also cuts into his parachute.
George Bush is now alone in shark-infested waters.
At this point, Bush must be thinking, my time is up.
In the Pacific Ocean, Lieutenant George Bush has just been shot down.
He immediately looks around for his fellow crewmates.
The Pacific is filled with sharks. A lot of times, guys would bail out safely, get into the water, never be seen again.
The parachute has a life raft, and the life raft inflates. He was told, do not get taken prisoner. There was a very high probability he would be tortured.
Those guys were ruthless. They didn't abide by any convention of any sort.
Some pilots who were captured were in fact cannibalized by the Japanese.
He suddenly sees what he realizes is the periscope of a submarine.
He assumes it's the Japanese and that it's all over. And the hatch opens and out jump American sailors.
A member of that crew has a movie camera and films the rescue of George H.W. Bush.
American pilots knew that they would be searched for. Bush received no different treatment than anyone else would have in the same situation.
That instilled in him a tremendous faith in the military, that he was this needle in the haystack in that massive Pacific Ocean, and yet they were able to find him. The first thing he says is, "Where is my crew? Do you have them here?" And that's when he is told, "I'm sorry, sir, we can't find them."
Bush spends the next several weeks of his life thinking about destiny, thinking about why his life has been spared while those of John Delaney and Ted White have not. And it's the most formative experience of George Bush's life.
I'll have that with me till I die. I know I was right to pull out over the sea, and I know I was right to tell them to get out of the damn airplane.
You look back at everything. What was the plan? Was it a good plan? Did I cover everything? Could I have covered anything better? And the bad part about it is there's no way to debrief it because they're gone.
It was a terrible burden that he thought would lessen over time, and it never did.
"46 years later, as president,
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States."
George Bush's experiences in World War II would guide him as he decides to counter Saddam Hussein's 1990 invasion of Kuwait with military action.
President Bush's immediate reaction was, I fought in World War II. I know exactly what it means when someone goes over a border. And he gets off of Marine One and says, unscripted,
This will not stand. This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait. I've got to go. I have to go to work.
George Bush knows when he's making the decision to send troops into combat what it means for those young men, and it's not something he takes lightly.
The former pilot leans into his faith in the U.S. Air Force.
These are the times that try men's souls. Launch that fight. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
110,000 airstrikes were run first before combat troops were on the ground.
When Bush finally sends ground troops in, it's all but over in just 100 hours.
We like to say that President Bush was the last American president to start, finish, and win a war.
In October 1944, 1 month after George Bush is shot down and rescued, the future 38th President of the United States, Lieutenant Gerald Ford, is part of the Pacific Island hopping campaign. Ford has survived victorious battles for the Gilbert, Caroline, Mariana, and Bonin Islands. Now he is about to fight for the strategically key Philippine Islands in the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
Ultimately, the point is to get closer and closer and closer to Japan, constricting it, if you will, like a snake around its prey.
Ford is now an assistant navigator on board the aircraft carrier, the USS Monterey.
It's working with the captain. It's having a view of the whole ship. It's leading people. It's helping to lead the whole aircraft carrier.
As the largest naval battle of the war begins in the Leyte Gulf on October 23rd, Ford knows they are a target. Outnumbered, Japan resorts to coordinated attacks by kamikaze suicide pilots.
Ford and the fleet are at that moment where the Japanese leadership believe they have no other option than to unleash the kamikaze, the divine wave.
Kamikaze pilots receive rudimentary training in flying an aircraft. The aircraft would be hopped up with a lot of explosives, a lot of fuel, and these guys are given orders to go and find the U.S. fleet and basically crash in there. One single plane could sink a ship. This was a pretty good deal for a nation that was so much in peril as Japan.
When the Japanese kamikazes were attacking, Ford was kind of like the conductor of an orchestra. He needed to at once tell the ship where to go and then tell the gunners where to place their artillery.
Confronting the kamikazes was a terrifying prospect. You weren't just fighting against another combatant. You were fighting against someone who, in their mind, was already dead.
October 1944. Lieutenant Gerald Ford is on board the USS Monterey, facing the first wave of organized kamikaze attacks in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. By the end of the war, 34 American ships are smashed to pieces by 5,000 kamikaze pilots.
It's not enough to kill the pilot. You have to kill the plane.
Ford keeps replotting their course.
He was a very brave guy. I mean, he stood there and directed fire against incoming kamikaze planes that were attacking the Monterey.
And it was orchestrated skillfully and very courageously under fire the whole time.
After 3 days of intense aerial and naval battle, the Allies lose 3,000 men. The Japanese lose over 12,000. The Allies take the Philippines, and Gerald Ford and the USS Monterey survive.
The Monterey during World War II serves 556 days. It covers more nautical miles than any other vessel, and Gerald Ford is aboard the Monterey during that whole time. He boards the Monterey as just a lawyer from Michigan, and he leaves the ship really a battle-tested veteran of World War II, an internationalist, and a leader.
With the Philippines under Allied control and the Japanese Navy in disarray, the U.S. now has a clear run to advance on Tokyo.
Ultimately, you can bring to bear your real advantage, which is American air power.
And the U.S. has devastating new air technology. The B-29 Superfortress is the ultimate bomber, flying at 31,000 feet. To help identify key targets in Japan, the U.S. Air Force turns to a future president for help. Captain Ronald Reagan, and the first motion picture unit in Hollywood. The unit supports the war effort by making recruitment and training films.
And in 1944, they began an especially sensitive project, training pilots for bombing runs over mainland Japan.
Reagan begins work on the assignment. It is known as Special Film Project 152.
It's a top secret thing. In fact, in his memoir, Reagan later compares it as the kind of secret that's comparable to Project Manhattan, building the atom bomb. The Army First Motion Picture Unit would take photographs of war zones throughout the world, and that included Tokyo. From these photographs and footage, they built this detailed model of Tokyo and the approach to Tokyo.
Pilots who were going to be staging bombing raids on Tokyo would basically watch these, we would call them sort of simulation films almost. And they would see, okay, this is what the approach to Tokyo looks like.
The camera is now ready to roll. In effect, the camera is now a B-29.
Reagan voices the film.
Your target for this mission will be the Japan International Aircraft Company, Hiratsuka plant, with the nearby Hiratsuka Navy Arsenal as the secondary objective. The mouth of the Sagami River lies below this island.
Reagan would provide visual clues for the bombers. He would say things like, you're approaching Honshu Island, the main island of Japan. You'll see inlets here, a river here.
Notice that the target is made up of large, single-storied buildings set closely together.
Reagan really felt that this was a huge contribution to the war effort, even though he wasn't on the battle lines.
But this was it for Reagan, who didn't have an opportunity to actually fight in the war. Special Project 152 gave him a real opportunity to play an operational part in the success of the war.
Ronald Reagan's work helps the B-29 pilots to target Tokyo.
Upon reaching Mount Fuji, alter course to 94 degrees true. The target lies beyond
with devastating accuracy. They have one of the highest strike rates of the war. In Europe, after a successful D-Day campaign, Eisenhower and the Allies have liberated Paris. But now, they are locked in the largest land battle of World War II.
The Allies have suffered through a terrible winter in 1944 and 1945. And now you have this famous Battle of the Bulge, the German counteroffensive in the West.
The Battle of the Bulge is Hitler's last-ditch effort to keep Allied forces out of Germany. It's a full-scale attack. Some 10,000 Americans are killed during the month-long conflict. But the Allies declare victory on January 25th, 1945, taking back Belgium and Luxembourg. The path to Germany is now clear.
April 1945, by that point in the war, the issue is how much more is it going to take to win the war? And what sort of world will follow?
It was no secret that the Nazis were committing atrocities. It was no secret that they had as part of their plan to remove, reduce, eliminate peoples they thought undesirable. Knowing that and seeing it with your own eyes are two separate things.
Eisenhower has seen a lot of bad stuff in the war. He's seen bad stuff from the Germans, from the Italians. He's seen bad stuff from the British and the Americans. He understands that war is hell. But he's never seen anything like this.
When Eisenhower is first confronted with a concentration camp, he sees it as more than just an atrocity. It is the first time he considers the Nazis being criminals against humanity. He wants immediate, documented evidence that can never be refuted of the horrors of what the Nazis committed, and he wants the world to see their crimes.
Don't turn away, look. Burned alive. Horror unbelievable.
So he insists on throwing open the gates of the camp, bringing in the photographers, and making sure that those photographs get back to the United States.
He's the first person to anticipate that the day would come when some people would try and deny that this ever happened.
The effect on Eisenhower is devastating. Eisenhower leaves that camp angry.
After witnessing the Holocaust firsthand, he loses patience and respect for his enemy. This is no longer a battle of strategy and of generals. This is a battle for civilization against evil.
After General Eisenhower records the Nazi atrocities he finds in the concentration camps, the films are sent back to the States. One of the first to see the footage is Captain Ronald Reagan at the 1st Motion Picture Unit.
When the films that they were sending back were no longer of combat, but of skeletal people in these camps, that this had a great effect on my father and the way he viewed the world.
Reagan said ever after that this really impressed upon him the capacity of evil in the world.
Reagan keeps a copy of one of the reels. In the 70s, he shows the footage to his son.
I was 12 years old, and my father he told me that he was showing me this because he wanted me to know what human beings were capable of. And that this is what we had to guard against. That this is what people could do to other people. And that this could never be allowed to happen again.
Over 3 decades later,
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
President Reagan will take these lessons from World War II and use them to shape his policies during the Cold War. On June 12, 1987, Ronald Reagan travels to the Berlin Wall. Behind the wall is Soviet communist-controlled East Berlin.
Reagan, probably better than any president of the 20th century, understood the power of storytelling. He needs to be at the Brandenburg Gate. He needs to have the wall in the background. He could see the shot in his head.
He takes a dramatic stand against the so-called evil empire and its leader, Mikhail Gorbachev.
If you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan understood perfectly well. That was the soundbite. And people literally on the other side of the wall in East Berlin and in Eastern Europe, they heard this. And they took this as a signal that the United States was behind their efforts to, quite literally, tear down the wall.
2 years after Reagan's speech, the Berlin Wall falls.
Reagan was onto something really important, and that is, if America sticks by its moral guns, if the American president articulates what America stands for, those words resonate.
My father took from World War II the fact that there are bullies in the world. And he knew from long experience that bullies need to be confronted, need to be stood up to. And that's what World War II was really all about, wasn't it?
As Eisenhower's troops continue to liberate concentration camps, the Allies enter Berlin. Facing colossal military failure, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler commits suicide. Enemy forces surrender 2 days later, signaling the defeat of Nazi Germany. Eisenhower is still enraged by the horrors of the concentration camps and demands total and unconditional surrender from the surviving Nazi generals.
Eisenhower will refuse to meet any of the German commanders to negotiate with them. His subordinates are going to be there. Ike's not going to be there. He doesn't even want to talk to the Germans. He doesn't want to talk to the Nazis.
The Nazis sign the Instrument of Surrender on May 7th.
This is the news that electrified the world. Unconditional surrender. Victory with the pens of peace.
After nearly 6 years, the war in Europe is over.
It is a happy hour for the Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower. It is a happy hour for the free world, which all through the long darkness has battled toward this dawn.
By 1945, Eisenhower is someone who's got judgment, he's got moral courage, he's got the respect of everyone he comes into contact with.
General Eisenhower is received in London with the highest honors England can bestow.
He has become a personality really forged by war, and one that has come through it really a much stronger person.
This is the man Churchill called one of the greatest Americans.
He is among the greatest players on the global stage at this point.
You have done something in cementing bonds that must always remain between your country and mine, and into which scope must be brought Russia, France, China, all the other great countries that have helped to whip this Nazi, and we hope will quickly whip Japan.
This was what Americans were preparing for. This is what they were bracing themselves for. Yeah, it was great we won in Europe. Okay, we won the first half. Now we got to go win the second half.
The war is only partly over. Once the Germans are defeated, now Japan has to be defeated.
On April 12th, a tragic bulletin is issued from the White House. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is dead.
President Franklin Delano Roosevelt does not live to see victory in Europe. He dies of a brain hemorrhage 25 days earlier.
All Washington said their last farewell to the man who had led them for so long. No wonder the American people showed emotion, for FDR had won their hearts.
Vice President Harry S. Truman takes the oath of office as 32nd President.
It falls to President Truman to lead the country in the war against Japan. As victory is declared in Europe, in the Pacific, after 2 months of brutal fighting, the Allies have taken Iwo Jima and now Okinawa, the last island between the Americans and the Japanese mainland. But the Japanese are still showing no signs of surrender.
Americans have not fought against soldiers like this. They fought in wars where there was this sort of an understanding, you fight until you realize your side has lost, and then you surrender.
It was an enemy that would not simply give up.
So the Allies are now preparing an invasion force, twice the size of Operation Overlord, to attack mainland Japan. 6 million troops will man the largest combined naval armada of World War II.
You thought Normandy was a big deal. Wait till you see the invasion of the Japanese home islands.
August 1945. World War II has raged for nearly 6 years. 70 million are already dead. Families, cities, and nations devastated. Now, the Allies are preparing for the biggest and deadliest battle yet, the invasion of mainland Japan in 7 months' time. President Truman fears the battle could claim over 500,000 American lives.
There is a fundamental belief that the sooner the war ends, the more American lives will be saved.
It doesn't seem to too many people in Asia and the Pacific that the war is near an end, but of course most of them don't know about the atomic bomb.
Work had gone on secretly for 2 years at this place under the direction of British and American scientists.
It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe.
4 months after taking office, on August 6th, President Harry Truman makes the world-changing decision to detonate the first atomic bomb.
Truman's goal is the war has to end.
It was the psychological effect of this one bomb and then the second bomb in Nagasaki that made the Japanese realize, okay, the end is here.
The force from which the sun draws his power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
Almost no Americans at the time had second thoughts about the use of the bomb. Later, those second thoughts would creep in. Was that really necessary? But the general thinking, the overwhelming thinking of Americans was that the Japanese started this war. The use of this bomb shortened the war.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. General Douglas MacArthur has been appointed to receive the Japanese surrender.
On August 15th, 1945, World War II is finally over.
It is my earnest hope that from this, a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding, for freedom, tolerance, and justice. These proceedings are closed.
It's a conflagration that changes the nation, transforming the U.S. into an industrial superpower with the most elite military force in the world. It also forges 8 leaders whose wartime experience shapes who they are and how they respond as they guide the United States through the challenges of the last half of the American century.
The war changes their worldview. These men see the role that America needs to play in the world, to fend off evil.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
The presidency mattered to Americans before 1945. The presidency mattered to the world after 1945.
I pray that the coming years will be blessed with peace and prosperity for all.
Above all, these 8 men had real principles, and they believed that America stood for something.
America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle.
They had a strong faith in the ideas of the Founding Fathers, the ideas of the American Republic, and this is something that they were willing to fight for, not only in war, but also when they became leaders.
I pledge an uninterrupted and sincere search for peace.
With God's help, we can and will resolve the problems
which confront us. We are Americans.